All right, on to Marianne Moore and Amy Lowell and our quiz, which will be located at the end of this video. Please watch the whole video. Don't just skip to the quiz. With Marianne Moore, interesting poet, probably a little bit less, how shall I put this, abstract than some of the other modernist poets. She was kind of a, as your headnote says, a lady poet, kind of a Grandma Moses of poetry. Everybody liked her a lot. She's a little bit of an eccentric character. She wore a lot of hats. Her picture up there doesn't have a hat, but she used to wear like one of these colonial tricorner hats a lot. Give her different recitations in different hats and such. A couple of poems here I want us to take a look at. One of them is a fairly traditional, straightforward poem, almost kind of Robert Frost-like in a way, in some quality. If you've read some Robert Frost poetry, you'll know what I'm talking about. Second one is about poetry and why it's so doggone hard, right? Some people don't like poetry, especially modernist poetry, because they say it's just too doggone hard. I can't understand it. Well, that's the point of it, and I'll get to that in just a moment. Let's take a look at Silence. It's just one sort of extended statement. Is what it is here. My father used to say, superior people never make long visits, have to be shown Longfellow's grave or the glass flowers at Harvard. Self-reliant like the cat that takes its prey to privacy, the mouse's limp tail hanging like a shoelace from its mouth, they sometimes enjoy solitude, and can be robbed of speech by speech which has delighted them. The deepest feeling always shows itself in silence. Not in silence, but restraint. Nor was he insincere in saying, make my house your inn. Inns are not residences, right? Make my house your hotel. Just remember, hotels aren't for living in. They're just for staying in briefly, right? No, he never said, mi casa es su casa. My house is your house. My house is your hotel. Yeah, you're going to be here for a while, but soon you need to check out, pal. That was the way her dad was. So there's a couple of different sayings here, different things that her father used to say that she remembers and that she's taken to heart. Interesting thing here. Her father used to say, superior people. People, I'm guessing he means mostly intellectually, but maybe morally. Superior people never make long visits. You don't need to crash in somebody's house for like a month or two. Right? They don't do that. They've got other things to do in their life. They move on, right? I mean, who hangs on like that? They don't have to be shown Longfellow's grave or the glass flowers at Harvard to go sightseeing, basically. Oh, let me show you. Oh, I'm glad you're in town. Let me go show you this. Let me go show you that. And you're always thinking when you have guests who are from out of town, what am I going to do with them? Where am I going to take them? What are we going to do? Great, superior people don't need that, right? They're okay not doing that. They're self-reliant, as she says, like a cat. Cats are pretty self-reliant, you know. I mean, they want company sometimes, but sometimes they just want you to leave them the heck alone. Who takes its prey to privacy. In other words, they're private people. They're content doing their own thing. I always get tired of these young people who say, I'm bored, I'm bored, I'm bored, I'm bored. Well, you wouldn't be bored if you had half an intellect. Bored people are usually not very bright people in my estimation. Sorry, that's an opinion, but it's true. And that is that if you're bored, it's because you're not bright enough to go figure out how to occupy yourself in something productive. So I guess I'm like Marianne Moore's dad in that respect. I respect people who know how to do something constructive with their time. They sometimes enjoy solitude and can be robbed of speech. That is, they can be made speechless by speech which has delighted them. You ever heard somebody who says something so well you have nothing to respond to that with, right? That's what she's talking about. They appreciate people who say things well. So much so that they say, I don't have anything to say to that. You pretty much summed it up there, pal. That was well put. The deepest feeling always shows itself in silence. Right? So people who feel the deepest, sometimes there's no words for it, right? Sometimes the person who has felt something more deeply has got less to say than somebody who didn't feel it as deeply. And he corrects himself and says, not in silence, but restraint. Sometimes when someone does something or says something that is very moving, you don't say anything either because you can't say anything more or because it just wouldn't be appropriate to say anything more, right? You restrain yourself and say, no, let's let it end like that. She or he did what they did, and that it stands for itself. It speaks for itself. It doesn't need commentary by me. So he's a very self-reliant fellow in several regards, and he wants other people to be the same way. Now, here's a different poem about Poetry. Remember we were talking in modernism about how modernism is a movement where people were trying to make sense of things. One of the reasons why when you go through a museum and you see a lot of modernist paintings, what we would call abstract art, sometimes people say that, and they say, I don't know what that thing means. That doesn't look like anything I've ever seen before. I don't know. Or they say, this is too hard. I can't understand it. Once you understand that modernists want you to find it difficult to understand their work. Why? Because life is hard to understand. So their art should be hard to understand. So when you look at their poem or you listen to their music or you look at their work of art and you say, I don't get it, that's exactly the feeling they're trying to elicit in you. The sense of confusion, the sense of, furrowed eyebrows, like, what does that mean? They want you to work to get meaning out of their work. They want you to think. They want you to participate. The modernist view is that the important things in life, you must work to make sense out of them. Art is participatory, okay? You need to work hard to do it. If you say, this is really difficult to understand, they're going, yeah, so is life. And that's what I'm trying to do with my art, is I'm trying to show you something about life. And life is hard, art is hard, is what they want. They don't want life to be, they don't think that life should be served up in a little dish. So they're not going to give you this simplistic view through their art of what life is like, Probably the antithesis of modernism is like Norman Rockwell paintings, which are pretty much cut and dried. Here it is. This is what life's about. See these people? This is what they do. This is what they think. This is how they are. Yep, that's life. There you go. That's all you need to know. Just go live like that. Just live like the people in the paintings. You'll be fine. Modernists deplore that because they say it's not that simplistic. Life just isn't that way. I mean, that's just very romantic and very, sentimental, but it's not true, right? So when she writes a poem about poetry, she wants to know, well, what are the essential qualities of poetry? What should we be looking for in great poetry? And she says, I too dislike it, right? I'm a poet and I don't like poetry sometimes. There are things that are important beyond all this fiddle. Reading it, however, with a perfect contempt for it, one discovers in it, after all, a place for the genuine. Now, you're going to have to tell me what you think a place for the genuine means. But she says, I find it frustrating to read poetry because poetry's not easy. It's not like reading, the back of a cereal box or something, or something some blogger wrote online. This is tough stuff to read. You got to think about what you're reading. You have to study it. You have to read it again and again and think about it and sift it and chew on it a little bit and try to figure out what does she mean by that. Because if you do, you'll realize, she says, one discovers in poetry a place for the genuine, for the authentic is another way to say it. There's honesty in poetry. There's authenticity in poetry. There's sincerity. People have something significant to say, not just passing, hey, how's the weather and all that kind of mess, but meaningful things can be found in poetry. But you got to work to get it, right? You got to work to get it. We do not admire that, what we cannot understand. We don't admire it. If we don't understand it, we say, we dismiss it. Don't do that, she says. Don't do that. Oh, I don't understand it, so it must not mean anything. I don't understand it, so it must not be important. I don't understand it, so it must be gibberish. Don't do that, she says. That's not fair. In the final lines of the poem, she says, in the meantime, if you demand on the one hand the raw material of poetry in all its rawness, and that which is on the other hand genuine, you are interested in poetry. Two things, right? If you demand the raw material of poetry, what's the raw material of poetry? The raw material of poetry, ideas, words, images, right? Pieces, real life, raw material, the kind of stuff. What's the raw material of a house? It's lumber and bricks and things, right? If you do the raw material of life in all its raw material of poetry in all its rawness, right? If you're good with that, if you like looking at how poems are made, how they're put together, if you like opening up the watch and seeing how it works, okay? And then if you like and you understand and you appreciate the genuineness of it, the sincerity of it. If you like those two things, then you like poetry. That's all you need. Just those two things. That's what you need. And so you should be looking for those things in the poetry that you read, no matter whether it's modernist or not. And if you do that, you can really appreciate it. Well, let's take a look at Amy Lowell here, a very sort of a different kind of poet, very interesting. That your head note says something really terrible, and I wish some of these people would do their research a little bit more. Ezra Pound never ever called her the name that it says in the head note. It says that Ezra Pound called her the hippopoetus because she was a large woman. He never said that. That's a lie. And Elaine Showalter should know better. He never said anything like that to her. He was kind of a weird guy, but he never said that. In any event, great poem here because it's an interesting poem in that she's a famous poet by the time 1925 rolls around. Everybody knows who she is. She's one of the great New England writers of the early 20th century. And she takes this opportunity to look at sort of the legacy of other women who were poets throughout history. She chooses three of them. Sappho, she misspells Sappho. There's two P's in Sappho. Sappho, Elizabeth Barrett Browning, and Emily Dickinson. Okay? And so it's kind of one of these poems of what would it be like to go back in time and visit the great poets? Or, hey, use your own imagination, whatever field you're interested in or something that you've been interested in. Who would you like to go back in time and meet, right? People that maybe you're into music and you'd like to go meet Beethoven, or maybe you'd like to meet, John Lennon or somebody like, who knows, people that are long gone, but you say, it'd be cool to sit down with them and jam or whatever. What would you say to them? Would you get along with them? What do you imagine their personalities to have been like? And you say, well, there's no telling what their personality's like. Well, wait a minute. If you really know them well, if you studied somebody well, like a writer or a painter or a musician or somebody like that, you can tell a lot about their personality by what they produced, can't you? You can do that. And you can say, I often think the people I think I would like to go back, the writers I think I would love to go have lunch with in heaven. Number one would be Chaucer. Chaucer was funny and smart. Any guy who can write the Canterbury Tales and create moving, passionate, wonderful, high art like that, and still tell a great fart joke. That's my kind of guy, right? I mean, that guy runs the gamut. He's terrific. Who else? I think Mark Twain. I like humorists. Although Twain, towards the end of his life, was a little bit on the dark side. But you know what I'm talking about. Maybe sports people that you'd love to go meet, historical people. Well, this is what the premise of the poem is. She chooses three, there's some other historical figures, but three primary poets that she wants to go back to, fellow female poets, and she wants to talk about them, their legacy, and the whole gist of the poem is, I wouldn't be here were it not for them. I wouldn't be who I am were it not for them. Reading them as a young woman growing up, I learned a lot, and I learned a lot to like about them and a lot to kind of pick at and criticize about them. Some of them drove me crazy. If you study something enough or study a person enough, you will really get to know them as though you really knew them. My dissertation was on 19th century writers, and I had to go to a number of different archives, Harvard, Massachusetts Historical Society, Boston Public Library, just a number of different archives. And I had to actually go and read their handwritten letters, collections of their diaries and letters. And I obviously these people had been dead long before I was ever born. But after reading literally thousands of letters and diary entries and whatnot, I feel like I actually knew them. And I would read a letter and I would say, oh, he wrote this letter to so-and-so. I know how this person's going to respond because I know these two really well. Boy, he's not going to like what he reads in this letter. And sure enough, I'd find the fellow's letter that he wrote to, and he writes back and he's not very happy. It's almost as though you're in a conversation with them, or you're kind of overhearing their conversation. So Amy Lowell knows these poets so well that she can imagine what it was like and can sort of characterize them. Sappho is mercurial and outrageous, right? Browning is frail and delicate. Dickinson is exacting. She's very precise. She's very cerebral. She likes to study things really, really carefully down to the minute details. And she's very, very just almost rudely honest about life in her poetry. She says, at the beginning, taking us by and large, we're a queer lot, we women who write poetry, and when you think how few of us there have been, it's queerer still. Okay, I rather think that there is just one reason. There is just the reason we are so sparse a kind of human being. The strength of 40,000 atlases is needed for our everyday concerns. She says, we're so busy doing other things, we women, that we haven't had time to become poets, many of us. There's so much burden that's placed on us for family and all the other things that we do. She starts in with talking about Sappho, and she says, I know a single slender thing about her, that loving she was like a burning birch tree, all tall and glittering fire, and that she wrote like the same fire caught up to heaven and held there, a frozen blaze before it broke and fell. Ah, me, I wish I could have talked to Sappho, surprised her reticences by flinging mine into the wind. This tossing off of garments which cloud the soul is none too easy doing with us today, but still, I think with Sappho one might accomplish it. She was famous for her wild parties and her extravagant lifestyle, for running around naked. You probably know that Sappho was a lesbian, and so was Amy Lowell. But I don't think there's a sexual thing here. It's more a question of throwing off society's restrictions. That's what she likes about Sappho. So, but Mrs. Browning, oh dear, Mrs. Browning's heart was squeezed in stiff conventions, right? Poor Mrs. Browning. All her stiff Victorian conventions, do this, don't do that, do this, don't do that. Her heart was squeezed in stiff conventions. All the huge, imperious need of loving, crushed within the body she believed so sick. Elizabeth Barrett Browning was not a very healthy person. I think Amy's picking on her a bit, that she thinks she was a hypochondriac, frankly. It was sick, poor lady, because words are merely I can never say this word, simulacra, after deeds having wrought a pattern. So Mrs. Browning, aloof and delicate, lay still upon her sofa, all her strength going to uphold her overtopping brain. Okay, so you got this picture of Elizabeth Barrett Browning writing her poetry. She has to lie on a sofa to write it because she's so ill, she's so frail, she's so delicate, and her head is so huge from being intelligent that it has to practically be propped up, going to uphold her overtopping brain. It seems miraculous, but she escaped to freedom and another motherhood than that of poems. This is a great line. She was a very woman. Try to make sense out of that. She was a very woman. What does that mean? She was not a very something woman, like a very nice woman, a very smart woman. She was just a very woman, right? Her womanliness, in other words, was like a huge part of who she was. For after all, after all this criticism, she's poking fun at her a little bit. She is another sister, but always, I rather think, an older sister. And not herself so curious a technician as to admit newfangled modes of writing. She's kind of stiff, kind of conventional, right? She never did experiment much. More like my older, responsible sister. But she's still a sister, right? She's still a writer who inspired me and did. And she says, for we're such a little family, she means women writers, of singing sisters, right? Poets, poetesses. As if I didn't know what those years felt like tied down to us to the sofa. She goes, hey, look, we've all been that way, right? It's just, poor Elizabeth never snapped out of it, right? She got, oh, my life is so heavy, right? Confound Victoria, this is Queen Victoria, confound Victoria and the slimy inhibition she loosed on all us Anglo-Saxon creatures. Queen Victoria, very famous for being stuffy and very formal and very prudish. She said her slimy inhibitions she loosed on all of us Anglo-Saxon creatures. She goes, it's hard to break loose from Victoria's influences. But then she gets to, she says, for speaking souls must always want to speak even when bad-eyed, narrow-minded queens set prudishness to keep the keys of impulse. But Sappho was dead, and I and others not yet peeped above the edge of possibility, so that's an end to speculating over tea-time talks about the movements and pentameters of Mrs. Browning. But I go dreaming on. I love with these my spiritual relations. In love with these my spiritual relations, I rather think I see myself walk up a flight of wooden steps and ring a doorbell and send a card in to Miss Dickinson. Right? Dickinson's someone she has to go up to the door and ring the doorbell to talk to her. She says, now this, I well believe I should have thought, is even better than Sappho. With Emily, you're really here, or never anywhere at all in range of mine. Wherefore, having begun in the strict center, we could slowly progress to various circumferences as we pleased. We could, but should we? That would quite depend on Emily. I think she'd be exacting. In other words, Emily likes to look at things very carefully, bit by bit by bit, from the center slowly outward. She likes to take small things and examine them very, very thoroughly, very exactingly in her poetry. It says, on page 517, she says, Sappho would speak, I think, quite openly, and Mrs. Browning guard a careful silence, but Emily would set doors ajar and slam them, and love you for your speed of observation. Watch me slam this door and then see who jumps, right? She loves the kind of startling poetry. She likes to startle you. How extraordinary unlike each is to me. Sappho spent and gained, and Mrs. Browning, after a misered girlhood, cut the strings which tied her money bags and let them run. But Emily hoarded, only giving herself to cold white paper, right? Interesting. Whose fault? Why, let us say, to be consistent, Queen Victoria's. But really, not to overrate the Queen, I feel obliged to mention Martin Luther, and behind him the long line of church fathers who drape their prurience like a dirty cloth about the naked majesty of God. In other words, why are we so hung up on things? Why are we so stuck on not talking about things that we should feel perfectly comfortable talking about? She says, some of those church fathers and Martin Luther and the Queen, all these people in the past who won't let you talk about what's really out there in the world, what's natural in the world, and that we shouldn't feel ashamed of talking about. The naked majesty of God. That's an interesting phrase, the naked majesty of God. Goodbye, my sisters. All of you are great, and all of you are marvelously strange, and none of you has any word for me. I cannot write like you. I cannot think in terms of pagan or of Christian now. I only hope that possibly someday some other woman with an itch for writing may turn to me as I have turned to you and chat with me a brief few minutes, right? So she sees this as part of a legacy. Someday there'll be other women poets who look to her poetry the way she looked at the people in the past. Older sisters are very sobering things. They're sobering. Why are they sobering? Why do they sober you up? Oh gosh, that's serious, right? No, you have not seemed strange to me, but near, frightfully near, and rather terrifying. I understand you all. For in myself. Is that presumption? Yet indeed it's true. We are one family. And still my answer will not be any one of yours, I see. My answer to life's problems won't be the same as yours. We're all different, but we're a family, right? We're a family of writers. Well, never mind that now. Good night. Good night. It's a curious poem, isn't it? It's a really interesting poem. A delightful one in some ways. She really has the make of these women. I think she's got them nailed pretty well in a little thumbnail sketch of each one. If you've read their poetry, you say, you know what, she's got a pretty good take on them. But that's Amy Lowell. That's a taste of three modernist poets. Some of them employing imagism, right? Participating in that imagist movement. Here's our quiz. Question 1 in H.D.'s Oread. What do the pines or firs represent? Okay, what do they literally represent? Okay. 2, what does Marianne Moore claim is the most important thing for you to have or do in order to understand or appreciate poetry? Might not be a single thing. Number 3, what did Amy Lowell think of Queen Victoria? Be specific. Go to the poem itself and pull out something that and explain what was her feeling about or thought about Queen Victoria. Please get these in to me, if you would, by Friday at noon to my Yahoo account.